work here, and even a visit with me, a real astronaut. So sit tight and get ready to learn while we return to the moon.
Hello and welcome. I'm Matt Fetters with the Fairfax Network, and with me today is Megan Price, a student from Fairfax County Public Schools.
Hi.
Today, all across the nation, students like you, Megan, are celebrating Space Day.
Space Day is a nationwide celebration for students to examine the real-world applications of math, science, technology, and engineering. In this program, we'll find out that there are more than just astronauts working in the space program.
Today we're broadcasting from one of the best places in the world to show that science, technology, engineering, and math are important in our everyday lives and in our history. We're at the Smithsonian Institution's National Air and Space Museum, specifically the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center in Chantilly, Virginia. The Udvar-Hazy Center opened in 2003 to house the large number of artifacts that couldn't fit in the building on the National Mall. More than 120 aircraft are now on display here, including the Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird and a Concorde. The centerpiece of the James S. McDonnell Space Hangar is the Space Shuttle Enterprise, which is surrounded by more than 100 large space artifacts, including rockets and space capsules.
Roughly 20 miles away is the National Air and Space Museum on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. There are even more artifacts there, including many from the last time we visited the moon. Artifacts like a lunar lander, the original spacesuits used on the moon, and some really cool rockets. There's no place better to learn about the moon than these two locations, where aviation and space history come alive.
We're going to talk about the moon a lot today because the theme for Space Day 2006 is living and working on the moon. In January 2004, President Bush outlined some new challenges for NASA, and one of them was to return to the moon and someday to develop a moon base.
Exploring the moon will give us research opportunities and will help us better explore other planets in our solar system, planets like Mars. The moon is a great place to test technologies we will need to explore and survive elsewhere. Before we go much further, we want to let you know about a great contest we're featuring on today's program. Throughout the show, there will be a series of questions for your class to answer.
When you see this screen, that means it's quiz time. After the show, your teacher can fill in your answers at this website. And if you get all the questions correct, your class could win some awesome prizes, including a visit to your class by a real astronaut on Space Day 2007. So pay attention for quiz questions. Now let's begin the show.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In 1969, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first people to walk on the moon. They traveled in a capsule very similar to this one behind us. After years of research and trips into space, NASA accomplished the goal set out for them by President John Kennedy. But Matt, why did we want to go to the moon in the first place?
Well, Megan, after World War II, the U.S. was in the midst of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Although the Soviets were an ally during the war, soon afterwards they were seen as a threat. In 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, the first man-made satellite, and they began moving forward in space exploration, including putting the first person into space, Yuri Gagarin. American leaders felt they had to beat the Soviets in space exploration, so President Kennedy set the goal for NASA to put the first person on the moon in this famous speech.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
But people have been dreaming of going to the moon for a long time before President Kennedy's speech. Nearly 100 years before President Kennedy's speech in 1865, French author Jules Verne wrote a science fiction book called From the Earth to the Moon. This is a story about traveling to the moon inside a capsule. launched by a giant